Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about Azure Active Directory self-service password reset service, which is offered by Microsoft. Now, before we start jumping and implementing into SSPR, which is self-service password reset, let's try to understand what it is and how it actually flows together. So Azure AD self-service password reset service basically enables your users to reset their passwords or unlock their accounts without contacting IT staff. You might have a hybrid kind of infrastructure where you're actually managing all your identities through on-prem Active Directory, or you might be managing your users through Azure Cloud. In both cases, this service works and you don't need to contact your IT staff to get your passwords reset. Obviously, when your users try to reset their passwords, they are being prompted to provide the authentication. So whenever the SSPR service is basically provisions and your users registers for that, they need to select the authentication methods, which means this is secure. You don't need to worry about anything. And most importantly, your users can actually unlock their accounts or reset their passwords from anywhere. They don't have to be within the office. They don't need to contact anyone. They can do it online from anywhere. Obviously, when the users are doing this kind of service themselves, you are actually saving a lot on your IT support costs. You might have to, look at the calls that you are getting or your organization is actually getting to reset the passwords and compare those costs and see how much you can actually save on the efforts and probably on the costs as well. Lastly, there is actually a full reporting for the administrators. Administrators can actually go online and actually check what sort of activities your users have been performing. How many times they've been resetting their passwords or unlocking their accounts. So there is actually a full visibility for you or your administrators. Let's have a look at how this actually works. This is the self-service password user flow. So your user basically, logs on to your 365 environment. Or they basically log on to a URL to reset their password. When they do that, they're being asked to verify their identity. Now, these are all the authentication methods that your user actually has selected when they registered for this service. Or as an administrator, you can actually select what sort of methods users can actually use. We'll talk more about that when we try to implement SSPR. But user logs in, they want to reset their password, they're being asked to verify their identity. Once they have done that, then basically they are prompted with some different screen where they can actually reset their password. If you are using on-prem Active Directory, as I was saying before, it basically initiates a call to your Azure AD Connect, which then writes the password back to your on-prem Active Directory. So there is no IT staff involved in all that. Lastly, there are a few tips or important things to consider. When you enable self-service password reset in your Azure Active Directory for your users, right? Microsoft has basically released a combined registration experience for SSPR and Azure AD MFA. What it means is previously when your users were basically going for SSPR, they needed to provide authentication methods, which were basically different than your MFA. So your users were basically managing, two kind of authentication methods, a one for MFA and one for SSPR. But you can actually turn on the combined registration experience so that for both SSPR and MFA, there is only one set of authentication methods. So your users don't need to get confused about which method to select for either of the services. And then obviously when you apply or enable self-service password reset, you can actually enable it for your whole organization, or you can actually select a particular group which you can create in your Azure Active Directory. That could be a dynamic group, or you can manage that group, but you can use a particular group or apply this to a subset of users as well. Another important thing for this whole solution to work is basically the password write back to on-prem Active Directory. If you are using on-prem Active Directory, obviously you have your AD Connect in between your Azure AD and your on-prem Active Directory. So if I go back to the previous slide, you will see that between your Azure Cloud and your on-prem Active Directory, there is a Azure AD Connect in between. Now, this is the service which basically is communicating between your on-prem Active Directory and your Azure Active Directory. For this solution to work with on-prem Active Directory, password write back needs to be enabled within your Azure AD Connect, so that when a user resets the password within your Azure Active Directory, it is enabled in here so that it can actually write it back to your on-prem Active Directory. Let's jump on to implementing SSPR and see how it works. Now, to enable self-service password reset, obviously we have to do it from Azure Active Directory. So I'm currently logged on to portal.azure.com and I'm going to click on Azure Active Directory. Once the page loads up, on my left hand side, I'll need to click on the password reset. Now, on the password reset page, we have these options to enable self-service password reset. Currently, it is not enabled, but we have options to enable it for everyone within the organization or for selected, which is basically for a group if you want to select. So if we keep on selected, then obviously I will need to select a group which I want to enable it for. Now let's go ahead and create a group first and see how this will all hang together. So I'll click on discard changes and I'll go back to the Azure Active Directory link and we will click on groups. So we're going to create a group and add some users in it so that those are enabled for password reset. So we're just going to name this group SSPR and let's just leave it blank now and create, or we can actually add members from here. So let's just add some members. Now I want to enable it for Chris Green and we say select and we create it. Now this group which I created, this is basically a static group, where I'll be adding members, but you can create dynamic groups as well. So yeah, and use those groups to add within your password reset selected kind of option. So that group is now created. So let's just go back to the Azure Active Directory again, and we're going to click on password reset, and this time we're going to say selected because we want to select a group and click on this group name and we want to search for SSPR. So that's the group we created and we want to add it and click on save. Now everyone who is in this group, self-service password reset is now enabled for all those users. All right. Once you have done that, then click on the authentication methods. So these are the methods that you want your users to select when they register for SSPR. We'll talk more about registration in a bit, but let's select the authentication methods first, right? Obviously, you can select a number of methods required to reset, which is basically if you are selecting one method and if your users can't get to that method, then the second option kind of give them an option to use that method to satisfy the authentication. For now, we can go for one or two, but let's just say two, and we select we want the mobile app code, email, mobile phone. I'm not too fussed about office phone, but you can actually add some these options as well. You can add security questions, and you can actually select how many questions you want your users to basically satisfy for the registration, and how many questions you want them to basically ask when they try to reset their passwords. So these are kind of the questions you can select but for now, let's just untick that option. We just want to keep these three now. We can create mobile app notification. I don't know if you noticed, but this mobile app notification is only available if you select two methods. It's not available if you select only one method. These are the methods we need to select, and then we click on save, and then we click on the registration. So on the registration page, now this is the option where you can actually say whether you want your users to register when they sign in. So what happens is, if this is yes, so the next time when your users try to sign in into Office 365 services, they will be prompted to basically satisfy some criteria. It's basically asking them to select their authentication methods. We will see how that all works in a bit. So this option is handy if you want to force your users to use register for self-service password rather than keeping it no. If you are enabling it for everyone or for a selected group of users, you want them to register for self-service password and provide authentication methods. So these are the number of days where users will be basically asked to reconfirm the authentication. This number is basically let's say, for example, after 181 days, users might be prompted to just verify that if the authentication methods that they have selected previously are still valid. So let's just click on save again on the registration methods, and then you have the notifications options. Whenever your users reset their passwords, do you want to notify your users? It's yes or no. So this is basically to prevent if someone else has reset their passwords and they just get a notification saying, yep, your password has been reset. The second option is whether you want to notify all admins when other admins reset their passwords, right? So that's again another notification that you can actually enable. Next one we have is about customizations. This page is basically used for any help desk email or URL. So if your users gets into any trouble, if they see any errors, you can basically enable this option, and then can provide your users, okay, if they see any error, they will see this message as well saying, okay, please contact your help desk at the email you provide, or please visit this URL for further information. And obviously this is your on-prem integration. I don't have any on-prem integration, so this is all cloud-based. But if you have on-prem Active Directory, then obviously, as I said, you need to enable password writeback on your Azure AD Connect server, and that information will be displayed here. We have configured everything on this page for self-service password reset. Let's try to log in with Chris Green and see the experience for a user. So I've opened a new window which is in incognito mode, and I'm trying to log on to portal.office.com, and I'll try to sign in as Chris Green. So this is when the self-service password reset is enabled and the user is now trying to log on to your Microsoft 365 environment. So that's that experience the user will see or face. So I'll just say Chris G at TechByTosh.com, and we click next, and then we provide the password. And that's the prompt your users will get when the self-service password is enabled. So it just basically saying more information is required. So I'll click on next, and it's basically now saying your organization requires you to set up the following methods of proving who you are. So by default, which is basically a default method which can be changed, is basically asking me to install Microsoft Authenticator app on my phone. You can also opt for different methods. So you can say I want to use email or a phone. So these are all the options which we have enabled previously within the registration part of SSPR. And they can also skip setup. If they skip setup, then obviously they can still sign in. But when they come back again and try to sign in into 365 again, they will be prompted to basically select the authentication methods again. Let's just say I sign out from this, and let's try to sign back in again with Chris G and see what happens. So that's already signed out, and I'm signing in again, and let's go to Chris G. I provide the password. And it will again prompt me to basically say that more information is actually required. So I click next. And if I want to use the Microsoft Authenticator app option, obviously, I need to download that app, which is basically a recommended option for your users. Now, I already have this app installed on my phone, not for this account, but for a different account. So I'm just going to click next. And so it basically says set up your account in your app, add an account, and select other. So I click next again, and I'm basically just trying to open the Authenticator app on my phone right now, and I'm going to scan this code. Click next. It will now prompt me to enter the code, which is actually displaying within my Authenticator app on my phone. So I'm just going to enter the code now. 742320 and click next. So it's not going to verify. It's a success and done. So I have now added one of the options and satisfied the requirement for this password reset. So this is the user experience. Now, other thing to note is your user can basically change the authentication methods anytime. So if I go to my account and view account, so this is still logged in as Chris Green, and that's a user who's actually performing these actions. So under that, I can click on the settings and privacy. It's basically a security info, and under security info, it's basically going to show me the authentication methods. And obviously we're going to make some security changes, so it's going to verify that it's actually me, a user who's actually going to make changes. So I'm going to satisfy this again, and once it's verified, then it's going to open the security info page. So on this page, this is the method that a user has added so far. So if I want, I can actually add more methods. So let's just say I want to add a phone, and click add, and I'm in Australia, so I enter my number there, and that's there, right? Or the other method is obviously through email. So let's just say this email, we click add, and I provide my email address. I just say at gmail.com and click next. So, a user can actually provide your Gmail addresses as well, or any other email if they don't have access to that. But I wouldn't prefer going this out to the Gmails, because again, Microsoft doesn't have any control on the Gmails. But once I satisfy the code, it's going to add it. So let's just do that as well. So I've entered the code and I click next. Now it's going to verify the code and add this method as another authentication method. Now this method is also added. Another important thing is about the combined registration experience, right? As I mentioned before, Microsoft is basically going to enable combined registration for all users in Azure AD tenants which were created before August 2020. Now, if your tenant was created before August 2020, Microsoft, from 1st of October 2022, Microsoft is starting to enable combined registration. Now, if you want to check whether you have the combined registration enabled or not, you can basically log on to your Azure Active Directory. Let me quickly show you where to look for that. So if I go back to my admin page and click on the Azure Active Directory, and then I click on user settings. Under user settings, there is actually manage user feature settings. Now, my tenant was created after 15th of August 2020, so I don't see that option here because it's already enabled for my tenant. But if your tenant was created before August 2020, you will see an option there similar to these options for the combined registration. And obviously, you will be able to enable the combined registration for a group. So if you click on selected and then select a group, so that way you can actually check about the combined registration. So I'm back to the My Sign-ins page for Chris Green. Now let's try to reset the password for Chris Green and see what happens. So if I go to passwordresets.microsoftonline.com, this is the screen Chris Green is presented with. Now I'm going to enter the email, so chrisg@techbytosh.com, and enter the code 60. Next. While it's verifying my account, it will now take me to a new page. So these are the two authentication methods that we have selected before, or Chris Green has selected before for the verifications. I can use this email and the code will be sent to my email with further instructions to reset the password, or there is actually a code which can be displayed, which is actually displaying right now on my Authenticator app, and I just need to enter the code. So I'm just going to use this option, and I'm just going to open the Authenticator, and let's just enter the code. So it's 039868, and I click next, and now I can basically change my password. I don't want to change my password, but this is what Chris Green gets, to change his password. So let's just cancel that out. So this is the user experience that actually Chris Green is going to get when he tries to reset his password. That's it for now. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you have any comments or feedback or any questions about this video, feel free to write it down, and I'll try to basically reply to your messages as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a great day.